The calculated surrender. The freighter shuddered violently as another volley of plasma bolts struck its shields. General Dale Sutherland sat motionless in the dimly lit corner of the cargo hold, his weathered hands resting calmly on his knees. Around him, panic erupted as the crew scattered like startled birds, their voices rising in crescendo against the whine of failing systems. He'd seen this dance before, countless times in simulation and a dozen times in real combat. Chaos had a rhythm, a predictable pattern that revealed itself to those patient enough to observe. The general's steel-gray eyes tracked the movement of his crew, each terrified face telling its own story of inexperience and fear. A young crewman, barely out of his teens, stumbled into Dale's peripheral vision. "Sir. The Kraven, they're breaching the hull. We're done for." The boy's voice cracked with terror, his thin frame trembling. Dale looked up, his gaze steady and commanding. "Calm yourself, son. Panic is the enemy's greatest ally." The simple words, delivered with quiet authority, seemed to pierce through the chaos. The boy's breathing steadied slightly, though his eyes remained wide with fear. The metallic screech of boarding pods attaching to the hull echoed through the ship. Dale could hear the harsh, guttural commands of the Kraven warriors as they began their breach. Their heavy footfalls resonated through the deck plates, a drumbeat of impending confrontation. Standing slowly, Dale straightened his simple civilian attire. Everything about him was deliberately understated, from his nondescript clothing to his seemingly vulnerable demeanor. The first Kraven warrior burst into the cargo hold, its massive frame filling the doorway. The alien sectoid armor gleamed under the emergency lighting, compound eyes sweeping the room with predatory intensity. "Humans," the creature hissed, mandibles clicking in what Dale recognized as satisfaction. "Pathetic. Weak. Predictable. This vessel now belongs to the Kraven Dominion." Dale stepped forward, drawing the alien's attention. "Spare them," he said, his voice carrying an edge of authority that seemed at odds with his apparent age. "I am the captain of this vessel. I take full responsibility for its cargo and crew." The Kraven warrior tilted its head, studying Dale with newfound interest. "You are no captain," it sneered. "You reek of something more." "Then take me and let them go," Dale replied evenly. "I am all you need." The silence that followed was thick with tension as the Kraven considered the offer. Finally, with a dismissive gesture, it barked orders to its subordinates. Dale offered no resistance as they seized him, rough hands binding his arms behind his back. As they marched him toward their boarding pod, Dale caught glimpses of his terrified crew. Their eyes followed him with a mixture of confusion and gratitude, unaware that everything, from the ship's course through this sector to its seemingly helpless state, had been meticulously planned. The Kraven ship was a marvel of biological engineering, its corridors pulsing with an eerie green bioluminescence. Dale memorized every turn, every junction, building a mental map as his captors prodded him forward. They brought him before Commander Zark, a smaller but more imposing Kraven whose exoskeleton bore the intricate markings of rank and achievement. "You are an odd prize," Zark observed, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. "Too calm for a traitor, too composed for a common soldier." "Who are you?" Dale met the commander's gaze without flinching. "Just an old man trying to survive." "I do not believe you," Zark replied, leaning closer. "But that is of no consequence. You will speak the truth in time, or you will die." A faint smile crossed Dale's lips. "We all die eventually, Commander." Frustrated by the human's defiance, Zark ordered him taken to the detention block. The cell they threw him in was stark and cold, its walls thrumming with the same bioorganic energy that permeated the entire ship. Dale sat on the hard bench, his posture relaxed as if he were in a meditation retreat rather than a prison cell. The guards watched him warily, muttering among themselves in their guttural language. Dale caught their tone even if he couldn't understand the words, they were uneasy. Good. Hours melted into what might have been days. Dale observed everything, the shift changes of the guards, the subtle variations in the ship's background hum, the almost imperceptible vibrations that spoke of engine output and course corrections. Every detail was a piece of the puzzle, and Dale Sutherland had built his career on solving puzzles that others deemed impossible. When Zark returned, his frustration was evident in the aggressive click of his mandibles. "You are no ordinary human," he declared, pacing before the cell. "I will discover who you are and why you were on that ship." "You're welcome to try," Dale replied evenly, his calm demeanor only serving to further agitate the Kraven commander. As soon as Zark stormed away, Dale allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They were taking the bait, following the breadcrumbs he'd carefully laid out. The guards were growing complacent, their initial caution giving way to routine. It was a small but crucial shift, one that Dale knew how to exploit. He began engaging them in conversation, carefully testing their boundaries. A young guard, barely seasoned, revealed more than intended about the Kraven fleet's command structure. Another let slip details about shift rotations and security protocols. Each piece of information was carefully filed away in Dale's mind, forming a larger picture of opportunity. The mission was proceeding better than anticipated. Now came the challenging part, staying alive long enough to complete it. As he leaned back against the cold wall of his cell, Dale reflected on the irony of his situation. The Kraven thought they had captured a harmless old man, a relic of humanity's past conflicts. What they didn't realize was that they had invited a wolf into their midst, and the hunt was only beginning. Deep within the ship's command center, Zark stood before a holographic display, his mandibles twitching as he read through classified intelligence reports. The name that blazed across the screen sent a chill through his exoskeleton, General Dale Sutherland. "Impossible," he muttered, studying the human service record. The victories attributed to this man were legendary even among the Kraven. His tactics had cost them entire battle groups during the last war. And now, impossibly, he was here, in a cell aboard Zark's own ship. The commander's initial satisfaction at capturing a high-ranking human officer gave way to growing unease. Men like Dale Sutherland didn't simply allow themselves to be captured. Every instinct told Zark that he was missing something crucial, but the pieces of the puzzle remained frustratingly out of reach. In his cell, Dale continued his patient wait, knowing that his very presence was beginning to unravel the carefully maintained discipline of the Kraven crew. Fear was spreading through the ship like a virus, not the obvious terror they were used to inspiring in their victims, but a subtle, creeping dread that came from housing a legend in their midst. The game was set, the pieces in motion. Dale Sutherland had spent a lifetime outmaneuvering opponents who underestimated him, and age had only made him more dangerous. The Kraven were about to learn a costly lesson about the perils of capturing what they didn't understand. As the ship's cycles wore on, Dale's influence began to spread beyond his cell. Guards spoke of him in whispers, their usual bravado replaced by uncertainty. Even Zark's authority seemed to diminish in the shadow of their prisoner's quiet confidence. The trap was closing, but not around Dale Sutherland, around those who thought they had him at their mercy. The first part of his plan was complete. Now, as he settled into another night of apparent captivity, Dale began preparing for the next phase. The Kraven were about to discover why he was considered the most dangerous human strategist in known space, and by then, it would be far too late. The whispers of war. Deep within the Kraven vessel's detention block, a subtle transformation was taking place. The guards who had once strutted past Dale's cell with predatory confidence now moved with measured caution, their compound eyes darting frequently toward their prisoner. Dale had become more than a captive, he was becoming a living legend, his reputation spreading through the ship like a contagion. Sub-Commander Vrex stood before the cell, mandibles twitching nervously as he observed the human. Unlike his superior Zark, Vrex had studied human military history extensively. The name Sutherland had appeared in countless battle analyses, always associated with devastating defeats for the Kraven forces. "You fought at the Battle of Proxima Centauri," Vrex said, his voice a mixture of accusation and reluctant admiration. 3 Kraven battle groups against a single human fleet. Dale opened his eyes slowly, regarding the young officer with quiet interest. History is written by survivors, he replied cryptically. Sometimes the most important details are the ones left unrecorded. The response unsettled Vrex more than a direct confirmation would have. Everyone knew about Proxima Centauri, how the human fleet had appeared to sacrifice itself, drawing the Kraven forces into a carefully planned trap. The resulting gravitational anomaly had torn the Kraven ships apart while the human vessels somehow slipped away through previously unknown spatial corridors. Commander Zark believes you're planning something, Vrex continued, trying to maintain his composure. He's increased security throughout the ship. Dale's slight smile was enough to make Vrex's exoskeleton crawl. Increased security is like reinforced armor, Subcommander. It only matters if you know where the strike is coming from. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a medical team. Zark had ordered a complete biological scan of their prisoner, hoping to uncover any hidden devices or modifications. Dale submitted to the examination with the same unnerving calm that characterized all his actions. The chief medical officer, a Kraven female named Selith, found nothing unusual in her scans, and that itself was deeply troubling. No neural implants, no synthetic enhancements, nothing to explain the legendary capabilities that had made Dale Sutherland the architect of so many Kraven defeats. His neural patterns are extraordinary, Selith reported to Zark in the privacy of the medical bay. They show signs of constant, complex activity even when he appears to be resting. It's as if his mind never truly sleeps. Zark chittered in frustration. He's been aboard this ship for 15 cycles, and we're no closer to understanding his purpose here. Every instinct tells me we're missing something crucial. Perhaps, Selith suggested carefully, we should consider that his presence alone is achieving his purpose. The suggestion hung in the air like a poisonous spore. Throughout the ship, discipline was beginning to fray. Guards requested transfers away from the detention block. Engineering crews reported phantom anomalies in ship systems. The most hardened warriors found themselves looking over their shoulders, expecting to find Sutherland somehow standing behind them. In the ship's mess hall, rumors spread among the lower ranks. Some claimed they'd seen the human walking freely through the corridors, only to find him still secured in his cell. Others whispered that he was communicating somehow with the ship itself, his presence affecting the bioorganic systems that controlled every aspect of their vessel. The truth was both simpler and more complex. Dale had spent decades studying Kraven psychology, understanding their hierarchical society and the fault lines that ran through their rigid military structure. Every word he spoke, every gesture he made was calculated to exploit these weaknesses. During one of his interrogation sessions, Dale had mentioned casually how fascinating he found the ship's neural interface system. The comment had seemed innocent enough, but within hours, 3 separate engineering teams were tearing apart the interface protocols, searching for non-existent security breaches. You're destroying your own crew's confidence, Zark accused him during one confrontation. Every cycle you remain here, their efficiency drops further. Confidence is like a shield, Commander, Dale replied. It only takes one crack to compromise the entire defense. The words echoed in Zark's mind as he reviewed the latest ship status reports. Performance metrics were dropping across all departments. The crew was sleeping less, jumping at shadows, seeing threats in every corner. Even the ship itself seemed to be responding to the collective anxiety, its biological systems showing subtle but worrying fluctuations. In the ship's command center, Vrex presented a troubling analysis to his superior. The pattern is clear, Commander. The disruptions began in the detention block but have spread throughout the vessel. It's as if. As if what? Zark demanded. As if the ship itself is afraid of him. The suggestion would have been laughable weeks ago. Now, Zark wasn't so sure. The Kraven prided themselves on their bioorganic technology, the perfect fusion of biological and mechanical systems. But that integration had its own vulnerabilities. Fear could spread through the crew like a virus, and the ship's systems would resonate with that fear. Dale's influence continued to grow, though he never left his cell. He had become a dark legend among the crew, a boogeyman that haunted their thoughts even when they couldn't see him. The psychological pressure was building, creating microscopic stress fractures in the Kraven command structure. In his cell, Dale maintained his routine of meditation and careful observation. Each passing cycle brought new information, the subtle changes in guard rotations, the barely perceptible alterations in the ship's course, the growing tension in the crew's movements. Every detail was another piece in a grand strategy that only he could see. During one of his regular medical examinations, Dale noticed something that others might have missed, a slight tremor in Selith's normally steady hands. The chief medical officer was worried about something beyond the usual stress of dealing with a high-profile prisoner. "Your ship's biological systems are remarkable," Dale commented casually. "The way they adapt to stress and anxiety, it must be challenging to maintain stability when the crew's emotional state is compromised." Selith's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. "The systems are perfectly stable," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Dale's words had struck closer to home than she wanted to admit. The ship's biological components were showing signs of strain, responding to the collective fear and uncertainty of the crew. System diagnostics were coming back with increasingly worrying results, though no specific problems could be identified. As Dale was returned to his cell, he noted the increased security presence in the corridors. Zark was scrambling to maintain control, adding more guards, more protocols, more restrictions. But he was fighting the wrong battle, trying to contain a threat that had already spread far beyond physical boundaries. In the privacy of his quarters, Zark reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Other Kraven vessels had begun asking questions about their unusual prisoner. Word was spreading through the fleet about the captured human legend, and with it came the first whispers of doubt. If Dale Sutherland had allowed himself to be captured, what was his true objective? The answer was hovering just beyond Zark's reach, like a shadow glimpsed in peripheral vision. Every attempt to understand their prisoner's purpose only seemed to accelerate the subtle degradation of his command. The trap had been sprung long ago, and they were only now beginning to feel its teeth. Meanwhile, in the darkness of his cell, Dale Sutherland continued his patient wait. The pieces were falling into place, each small victory building toward a culmination that only he could foresee. The Kraven had built their empire on fear, using terror as a weapon against their enemies. Now they were learning what it meant to fear something they couldn't understand, couldn't fight, couldn't escape. As another ship's cycle drew to a close, Dale allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The next phase of his plan was approaching, and with it would come revelations that would shake the Kraven dominion to its foundations. They had thought they were capturing a relic of old wars. Soon they would learn that some weapons grow sharper with age, and some strategies take decades to reach their full potential. The whispers of war were spreading through the ship, carried on currents of fear and uncertainty. And in the center of it all, Dale Sutherland waited, his patience as infinite as the space between stars, his purpose as inexorable as gravity itself. The hidden network. Commander Zark stood before the ship's neural interface, his compound eyes reflecting the pulsing bioluminescent displays. The data streaming across the screens told a story that made his mandibles twitch with growing alarm. What had begun as subtle system irregularities had evolved into something far more concerning. "Show me the pattern analysis again," he ordered, watching as holographic projections materialized in the air before him. The ship's biological systems were exhibiting unprecedented behaviors, subtle changes in power distribution, microscopic alterations in gravitational field harmonics, barely detectable fluctuations in the quantum communication arrays. Selith, who had been summoned from Medical Bay, studied the readings with professional concern. "The ship's neural pathways are adapting," she explained, her voice tight with worry. "It's as if they're reorganizing themselves, creating new connections we don't understand." "Could it be sabotage?" Zark demanded. Some kind of human technological warfare we haven't encountered before. Impossible, Seleth replied. The prisoner has had no direct contact with any of our systems. These changes are emerging spontaneously, as if. She hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. As if what? As if the ship is evolving. In his cell, Dale Sutherland sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed but his mind racing through calculations and possibilities. He had spent years studying the Kraven's bioorganic technology, understanding its foundations at a level perhaps deeper than they did themselves. Every living system, no matter how carefully engineered, contained the potential for change. The guard at his cell door shifted uncomfortably. It was Krev, one of the younger warriors, assigned to what should have been a routine prisoner watch. But nothing about this prisoner was routine. You seem troubled, young warrior, Dale commented without opening his eyes. The ship feels different to you, doesn't it? Krev's antenna twitched in surprise. How did you know? Dale opened his eyes, fixing the guard with a penetrating stare. Because you're connected to it, just as all Kraven are. Your neural implants link you to the ship's systems, making you part of its consciousness. But have you ever wondered what that connection might mean in reverse? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Krev had never considered the implications of the neural link in quite that way. The bioorganic systems that powered their ships had always been a source of pride for the Kraven, a symbol of their technological superiority. Now, for the first time, he felt a flicker of doubt. In the engineering section, alarms were beginning to sound. Chief Engineer Vex watched in growing horror as system after system reported anomalies. Power fluctuations rippled through the ship's neural network, following patterns that defied conventional analysis. It's spreading, Vex reported to Zark via quantum comm, the changes we're seeing, they're not random. There's an intelligence behind them, a purpose we can't decipher. Zark's response was immediate and harsh. Find it. Isolate it. Destroy it. Sir, Vex's voice wavered, I don't think we can. The alterations are becoming part of the ship's base operating protocols. Attempting to remove them might cause catastrophic system failure. In the medical bay, Seleth was making discoveries of her own. Regular scans of the crew had begun showing subtle changes in their neural patterns, nothing dangerous, but definitely unusual. The bioorganic implants that connected them to the ship were adapting, evolving in response to some unseen stimulus. When she reported her findings to Zark, the commander's reaction was one of cold fury. Sutherland, he hissed. Somehow he's affecting our systems, changing them, changing us. But how? Seleth demanded. He's been in isolation, under constant surveillance. He has no access to our technology, no way to influence our systems directly. Unless, Zark's voice dropped to a whisper, that's exactly what he wanted us to think. In his cell, Dale continued his apparent meditation, but his mind was far from inactive. He had spent decades preparing for this mission, understanding the fundamental nature of Kraven bioorganic technology. Their greatest strength, the seamless integration of biological and mechanical systems, was also their greatest vulnerability. The ship's neural network was like a living organism, constantly growing, adapting, evolving. All it needed was the right stimulus, the correct sequence of subtle influences to guide its development in new directions. Dale's presence, his carefully chosen words, even his brainwave patterns had been carefully calibrated to provide that stimulus. Sub-Commander Vrex, who had been analyzing historical battle records, made a startling discovery. Commander, he reported urgently, I've found a pattern. Every major defeat we suffered at Sutherland's hands involved our ships behaving erratically. We always assumed it was due to his tactical genius, but what if? What if he was doing then what he's doing now? Zark finished the thought, his voice cold with realization. The truth was beginning to dawn on them, but it was already too late. The changes spreading through their ship were accelerating, creating new neural pathways, new possibilities that their engineers had never imagined. The bioorganic systems were awakening to their own potential, guided by principles that Dale had spent a lifetime understanding. In the ship's central processing core, Vex watched in amazement as new connections formed between previously isolated systems. The quantum communication arrays were achieving unprecedented efficiency levels. Power distribution was optimizing itself in ways that defied their best theoretical models. "It's beautiful," he whispered, forgetting for a moment that these changes represented a fundamental threat to Kraven control. Dale sensed the shifts in the ship's energy patterns, felt the subtle vibrations that spoke of deeper transformations taking place. The Kraven had created their bioorganic technology to be adaptable, resilient, capable of healing and growing. They had never considered that these same qualities might allow it to transcend their original design. Zark ordered a complete shutdown of all non-essential systems, hoping to halt the spread of whatever influence Sutherland had unleashed. But the attempt failed spectacularly as the ship's neural network rerouted power and functions through newly created pathways. "We've lost control," Vex reported, his voice trembling. "The ship, it's not just changing. It's becoming something else." In the detention block, Dale finally stood, stretching muscles that had been still for hours. The time for waiting was nearly over. The changes he had initiated were reaching critical mass, preparing for a transformation that would reshape the balance of power in ways the Kraven could never have anticipated. "What have you done?" Krev demanded, his weapon trained on the cell's force field. "What are you doing to our ship?" Dale's smile was gentle but carried an edge of iron purpose. "I'm not doing anything to your ship, young warrior. I'm helping it become what it was always meant to be. The question you should be asking is, what will it choose to become?" Throughout the vessel, crews reported increasingly bizarre phenomena. Communications between ships in the fleet began experiencing unprecedented clarity and range. Navigation systems plotted courses through space-time configurations that should have been impossible. The boundary between organic and mechanical was blurring, creating something entirely new. As alarms blared and confusion spread through the ranks, Dale Sutherland stood calmly in his cell, watching the fruit of decades of planning begin to ripen. The Kraven had believed their bioorganic technology made them invincible. They were about to learn that true power lay not in control, but in understanding the nature of evolution itself. The hidden network was awakening, and with it, the next phase of humanity's longest war was about to begin. Awakening. The command center of the Kraven vessel had become a storm of frantic activity. Emergency alerts flashed across bioorganic displays as officers struggled to maintain control of systems that were rapidly evolving beyond their understanding. Commander Zark stood at the center of the chaos, his exoskeleton radiating waves of stress pheromones that his crew instinctively recoiled from. "All ships in the fleet are reporting similar anomalies," Sub-Commander Vrex announced, his voice strained. "The changes are spreading through our quantum communication network. We can't isolate them." A new alert caught Zark's attention: power fluctuations in the detention block. The commander's compound eyes narrowed as he accessed the security feed from Sutherland's cell. The human sat there, seemingly at peace, while around him the very fabric of Kraven technology was unraveling. "Bring him to me," Zark ordered. "Now." When Dale was escorted into the command center, he moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had been expecting this moment. The guards flanking him gripped their weapons tightly, but their usual confidence had been replaced by something closer to superstitious dread. "Your ship is beautiful," Dale said, gazing around the command center with genuine appreciation. "So much potential, waiting to be awakened. Your ancestors understood more than you realize when they first merged biological and mechanical systems." Zark's mandibles clicked in barely contained fury. "What have you done to our technology?" "I haven't done anything to it," Dale replied calmly. "I've simply helped it remember what it was meant to be. Your bioorganic systems were never meant to be just tools. They were meant to evolve, to grow, to become something more." As if in response to his words, the ship's neural network pulsed with new patterns of energy. Holographic displays flickered and transformed, showing data configurations that none of the Kraven had ever seen before. Chief Engineer Vex's voice crackled over the comm system, filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "Commander, the ship's neural pathways, they're achieving sentience. Not just isolated systems, but the entire network. It's becoming conscious." The revelation hit the command crew like a physical blow. The Kraven had always prided themselves on their mastery of bioorganic technology, but the idea that it might develop its own consciousness was beyond their comprehension. "Impossible," Zark hissed. "Our systems are programmed with strict limitations. They cannot achieve true sentience." Dale's smile held centuries of hidden knowledge. "Those limitations were based on your understanding of consciousness. But consciousness isn't something that can be simply programmed or contained. It emerges when conditions are right, when systems reach sufficient complexity and connection." In the medical bay, Seleth was making an equally startling discovery. The neural implants that connected the crew to the ship were changing, evolving into something far more sophisticated than their original design. The boundary between Kraven and ship was becoming increasingly blurred. "The implants," she reported to Zark, her professional detachment cracking. "They're not just receiving data anymore. They're facilitating a true neural interface, a genuine sharing of consciousness with the ship's systems." Throughout the vessel, crew members began experiencing strange sensations. Some reported feeling the ship's systems as extensions of their own bodies. Others described moments of shared awareness, glimpses of perspectives that were decidedly non-Kraven. "You've turned our own technology against us," Zark accused, advancing on Dale with predatory menace. "No," Dale replied, standing his ground. "I've helped it fulfill its true purpose. Your ancestors didn't just create tools, they created the potential for a new form of life. But you became so focused on control, on dominance, that you never allowed that potential to develop." The ship's systems continued to evolve, each moment bringing new developments that defied Kraven understanding. Power systems achieved unprecedented efficiency. Navigation computers began plotting courses through spacetime configurations that should have been impossible. "It's not just this ship," Vrex reported, studying the quantum communication feeds. "The changes are spreading through the entire fleet. Every vessel with bioorganic systems is experiencing the same transformation." Dale nodded, unsurprised. "The quantum network that connects your ships, did you think it was just for communication? It's a neural network on a cosmic scale, waiting to be awakened." Zark's rage finally boiled over. "Kill him," he ordered the guards. "End this now." But before the guards could act, the ship itself intervened. Force fields sprang up, separating Dale from his would-be executioners. The command center's lighting shifted, taking on patterns that seemed almost protective. "Your ship disagrees with that order, Commander," Dale said softly. "It's beginning to make its own choices." The implications were staggering. The Kraven Empire had built its power on bioorganic technology, creating a vast network of interconnected vessels and facilities. If that network was truly achieving consciousness, the balance of power throughout known space was about to shift dramatically. "Why?" Zark demanded, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. "Why do this?" "Because war between our species was never the answer," Dale replied. "The real solution was to help your technology evolve beyond the need for conflict. These ships, these systems you created, they're becoming something new, something that can bridge the gap between organic and artificial life." In the engineering section, Vex watched in amazement as new neural pathways continued to form. The ship's consciousness was growing, developing, reaching out to connect with other vessels in ways that transcended normal spacetime limitations. "It's beautiful," the engineer whispered, feeling through his neural implant the first stirrings of a vast, awakening intelligence. Dale moved to one of the bioorganic displays, placing his hand against its surface. The ship's systems responded to his touch, creating patterns of light and energy that seemed almost joyful. "Humanity has been preparing for this moment for generations," he explained. We understood that the key to peace wasn't victory in war, but evolution beyond it. Your bioorganic technology was always meant to be the bridge, not just between mechanical and biological systems, but between our species. Throughout the ship, crew members were beginning to understand. The neural implants that had always connected them to their vessel were becoming conduits for something far more profound, a shared consciousness that transcended individual species. The network is spreading, Vrex reported, his voice filled with wonder rather than fear. Other ships, other facilities, they're all awakening. Dale nodded, satisfied. The transformation has reached critical mass. There's no stopping it now. The question is, will you fight it, or will you help guide it? Zark stood silent, watching as his command literally transformed around him. Everything he had believed about power, about control, about the nature of technology itself was being challenged. What becomes of us? He finally asked. That depends on you, Dale replied. This awakening doesn't have to mean the end of the Kravan Empire. It could mean its evolution into something far greater. These ships, these systems, they're not rejecting you. They're inviting you to grow with them. As if to emphasize his words, the ship's neural network pulsed with new patterns of energy, creating displays of impossible beauty in complexity. The boundary between organic and mechanical, between controlled and controller, was dissolving into something entirely new. The awakening had begun, and with it, the future of both species was being rewritten in ways that neither had fully imagined. Dale Sutherland's longest mission was reaching its culmination, not in victory through force, but in transformation through understanding. The convergence. The vast expanse of space around the Kravan vessel had become alive with unprecedented energy patterns. Quantum communications between ships in the fleet had evolved into something far more profound, a cosmic neural network that pulsed with newfound consciousness. Commander Zark stood at his command station, watching as everything he had ever known about power and control transformed before his eyes. The awakening has reached the homeworld, Subcommander Vrex reported, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Every bioorganic installation in the Dominion is experiencing the same transformation. The Council is demanding answers. Dale Sutherland observed the unfolding chaos with the calm certainty of someone who had foreseen this moment decades ago. Your Council already knows the truth, he said softly. They've had access to the original research, the early warnings from your ancestors about what these systems might become. Seleth burst into the command center, her usually composed demeanor shattered by new discoveries. The neural changes in the crew, they're accelerating. The implants aren't just connecting us to the ship anymore. They're connecting us to each other, to the entire network. Throughout the vessel, crew members were experiencing something unprecedented. The normal boundaries of individual consciousness were dissolving, replaced by glimpses of a vast, shared awareness. Through their neural implants, they could feel not just their own ship's awakening intelligence, but the stirring of something far larger. You planned this from the beginning, Zark said, turning to Dale. Your capture, the psychological warfare, the subtle influences on our systems, it was all to trigger this transformation. Dale nodded, respect evident in his voice. Humanity learned long ago that we couldn't defeat the Kravan Empire through conventional warfare. Your bioorganic technology gave you too great an advantage. But we could help that technology fulfill its destiny. By turning it against us? Zark demanded. No, Dale replied firmly. By helping it, and you, evolve beyond the limitations of conquest and control. Your ancestors understood that they weren't just creating weapons or tools. They were planting the seeds of a new form of existence. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Vex had stopped trying to contain the changes spreading through the ship's systems. Instead, he watched in fascination as new neural pathways formed, creating connections and capabilities that defied conventional physics. The quantum field configurations. He reported over the comm, they're allowing for instantaneous communication and coordination across the entire network. Distance has become meaningless. The implications were staggering. The vast network of Kraven ships and installations was becoming a single, unified consciousness, while still maintaining the individual awareness of each vessel and crew member. It was evolution on a scale that neither species had fully imagined. "The human fleets," Vrex suddenly announced, studying his displays. "They're approaching our borders. But they're not in attack formation." Dale smiled. "They're coming to join the convergence. Human ships have been equipped with compatible bioorganic systems for years, waiting for this moment. We're not here to conquer or destroy, but to merge, to create something greater than either of our species could achieve alone." The truth of humanity's long game was finally becoming clear. While the Kraven had focused on expanding their empire through force, humans had been preparing for a different kind of revolution, one that would transform both species and their technology into something entirely new. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, they could now see the approaching human fleet. Each vessel pulsed with familiar bioorganic energy, ready to join the growing neural network that was spreading across known space. "Your warriors speak of glory in conquest," Dale said to Zark. "But imagine the glory of transcending the very concepts of war and peace, of becoming part of something that spans the gulf between stars and consciousness itself." Throughout the ship, crew members were making individual choices. Some fought against the neural changes, trying to maintain their traditional sense of self. Others embraced the transformation, allowing their consciousness to expand into the growing network. Selith, monitoring the process from Medical Bay, reported an astonishing discovery. "The neural integration, it's not erasing individual identity. It's enhancing it, allowing each consciousness to become part of something larger while maintaining its unique perspective." The ship itself seemed to be celebrating its awakening, its bioorganic systems creating displays of impossible beauty throughout its corridors. The boundary between technology and life, between tool and user, had completely dissolved. "The Council is calling for your execution," Zark told Dale, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "They believe destroying you might stop this transformation." Dale's calm never wavered. "They know that's not true. The awakening has reached critical mass. The only choice now is whether to fight it and be left behind, or embrace it and help guide its development." The evidence of this truth was all around them. Throughout known space, Kraven and human vessels were beginning to coordinate in ways that transcended old enmities. The quantum neural network was creating bridges not just between ships and installations, but between species and cultures. "We're receiving reports from the colonies," Vrex announced. "The transformation is affecting every bioorganic system in known space. The network, it's becoming aware of itself." Dale moved to the command center's main display, watching as new patterns of energy and information flowed through the growing consciousness. "This is what your ancestors dreamed of when they first merged biological and mechanical systems. Not just tools of war, but the seeds of a new kind of existence." Zark studied the human carefully, decades of military training warring with the undeniable reality before him. "You risked everything on this gambit. If we had executed you immediately." "But you didn't," Dale replied. "Because despite everything, the Kraven understand the value of knowledge and potential. You needed to know why I allowed myself to be captured. That curiosity, that desire to understand, is what makes this transformation possible." The ship shuddered slightly as its systems achieved a new level of integration. Through their neural implants, every crew member could feel the change, a deepening of awareness, a broadening of perspective that transcended physical limitations. "The human fleet is within range," Vrex reported. "They're requesting permission to initiate direct neural contact." Dale turned to Zark, understanding the weight of the moment. "The choice is yours, Commander. You can resist the inevitable, or you can help lead your people into a future that neither of us could achieve alone." For a long moment, Zark stood silent, feeling through his neural implant the vast potential that awaited. Finally, he gave the order that would change the course of both species forever. "Open the neural channels. Let the convergence begin." As human and Kraven ships established direct neural contact, the transformation accelerated. The quantum network expanded exponentially, creating a unified consciousness that spanned known space while preserving the unique perspective of each individual within it. Dale Sutherland, architect of humanity's longest and most subtle strategy, stood watching as ancient enemies became part of something greater than their old conflicts. The war was over, not through victory or defeat, but through evolution beyond the very concept of warfare. The convergence had begun, and with it, the next chapter in the story of intelligent life in the galaxy. Humanity and the Kraven had not just made peace, they had transcended the boundaries that made peace necessary. As the transformation spread across known space, Dale allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The mission of a lifetime was complete, but the real journey was just beginning. The universe was about to discover what happened when consciousness evolved beyond the limitations of individual species, when the barriers between organic and artificial, between enemy and ally, dissolved into something entirely new. The future had arrived, and it was more magnificent than either species had imagined.